Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. Okay, where do we stand now? Typically, after an election, we'd be hearing about the transition team, possibly a post-mortem from the vanquished party, but we really have very little of that. Actually, what we have is we have competing narratives by media outlets, okay? If you watched Sean Hannity on Fox or Laura Ingraham, they devoted most of their time to voter fraud. If you watch CNN or MSNBC, it's what kind of administration the Biden people will present us. Completely divergent narratives here. To discuss this, we have Rob Taub, one of my favorite guests on Crosstalk and here at the Gaggle. And of course, we have George Szamuely, a founding partner in the Gaggle here. Rob, where do we stand right now? Because you're one of the normal Democrats I know. You're a very rare breed right now. So, I'm as a concerned conservative, rational, and willing to listen to the other side. How do you see how this is all playing out?
I think it's just an explosive mishmash of pending disaster for both parties. I came across a great quote recently from, of all people, Werner Herzog, the director, because during the pandemic, with all the gyms closed, I've been walking everywhere. And he said, the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. And I grew up in a political family. My father worked for Johnson and Humphrey and actually was in the White House. My son worked in the White House, and my mother was Bobby Kennedy's campaign manager in New Jersey. But my other set of grandparents, my mother's parents, were like old ward politicians. And they were Jews living in an Irish neighborhood. And their congressman, Eddie Patton, walked the neighborhood and came up and talked to everybody and knew exactly what was going on. He knew when you were baptized, when you were bar mitzvahed, what was going on. And he really had his pulse, his finger on the pulse of everything. Today's politicians know nothing. I live on the edge of Harlem, and I was walking through Harlem every day, talking to people, realizing how disgruntled they were, that blacks and Hispanics there were not happy with the Democratic Party. When I posted this on Twitter, guess what I was told? I was a racist and shouldn't be allowed to go to Harlem and really can't speak for those people. Oh, I thought I was being a journalist.
Oh, I guess a white middle-aged Jew can't get outside of his the little box that they put you in. That's exactly what's going on.
I should be sure Don Lemon instead and just judging everybody and crying intermittently.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes my point. My point being is that politicians from both sides are out of touch. Ironically, the person that did have his finger more on the pulse, love him or hate him, and I hate him, but I understand him, was Donald Trump. He was more of an analog candidate in a digital age, and that resonated. And the Democrats still don't get it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that whatever else you can say about Trump, he did touch a nerve, and he did raise issues that no other politician had done. Members of the House of Representatives, they hadn't raised any of the crucial issues, which is America was still running an empire long after the Cold War was over, and an empire that wasn't doing any good for American workers. America was becoming deindustrialized and running massive deficits and losing jobs through unfair competition, through offshoring, replacement of labor by the cheap labor crossing the border, and by the phony H-1B programs. Trump touched a nerve, and the Democrats have not done so. So now we're asked to believe the status quo ante has been restored, everything is good, we're all back to normal. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, that's wishful thinking from CNN and New York Times that somehow we're going back to the good old days. No.
But what has happened here? See, I think we're only only a few days out from it all, but I'm concerned that there isn't a real forensic study of the election here. What is remarkable to me is there was no blue wave. there were more Hispanics, more blacks, more women, every single minority you can think of voted Republican, with the exception of white educated men. And that's going to be forensically studied, I hope, for a while here. But my point is that you had for the first time, maybe I think in my lifetime, the Republicans actually expanded their tent. And I think that's something that's remarkable. George, they lost, what, 10, 11 seats in the House?
Yes.
Okay.
The Democrats, exactly, yeah. The market is now quite narrowed, but
whatever the tussle is, because my position is I'm not going to call the presidential race until it's certified, okay? Because I think it's that close, and I think that's fair, okay? And when it's certified, I will, one way or another, grudgingly say, yes, I will go with it, okay? But until then, I won't. But the big story is here how Donald Trump changed the GOP, which I never thought he would do. I said to you, George, over and over again, he never expanded his base. Now I have to eat crow because I was wrong. Rob, go ahead.
Well, I think that, again, it was when Trump won, it was a referendum against Hillary and the Democrats, and they didn't understand it. Instead, think about when you talk about drug addicts in denial, alcoholics in denial, wife beaters in denial, the Democrats are more in denial as a group than anything I've ever seen. So instead of saying, yeah, wow, we had another referendum here, Donald Trump, aside from all of his idiocy and bad behavior and chaos that he created, he still made it a neck and neck vote because people can't tolerate the Democrats. And what do the Democrats say? Wow, we've got a country filled with racists. I've also heard, this is one of my favorites from my New York Jewish intelligentsia family. I'd love to be sitting next to the toothless hillbillies that vote for Trump. And to which, this was at a Passover Seder a couple of years ago, and I said, there are probably 10 of them at this table, and you just don't know it. Just won't admit it. This is the truth.
Right. No, I think Rob's absolutely right. That that this is the interpretation that the Democrats, and they're making it explicit. Michelle Obama's tweets are quite explicit about this. What's the problem? The problem is we've got a whole bunch of racists. Trump
is you're all ignorant, repugnant, racist, creeps, and thugs. Let's unite and heal.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, let me live peacefully in my $11 million mansion by the seaside, which you racist scum can't afford to live in.
Yes.
Well, I would say the racist scum paid for it. Okay. Okay. No. Okay. But this brings up a very fundamental point that I think is so important here, is that we have voter shaming, and I think, Rob, the three of us are basically the same age right here. That's a new phenomenon, or maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't see voter shaming like we've now that I've never seen it in the past like we see it now. What is your take?
We become so tribal. You're not allowed, and I think a lot of it has to do too with social media, because people don't really confront one another. So It creates more bullying, because what it used to be, that old expression, we're all old enough to know this, say that to my face. And now you never have to. And it's easy to name call. But I also think, I'm going to harken back to my Russian history of the Bolshevik Revolution, which was really a small percentage of elites that were embracing a level of socialism, and they eventually murdered and got rid of all of the factory owners and businessmen. And then when they tried to run the businesses and factories, 15 million people starved to death. I'm paraphrasing here, but it is pretty factual. And to me, I mean, that's what I see as a paradigm for a Bill de Blasio. Let's burn down New York. Let's demonize the wealthy, who have all left, by the way, or are in the process of leaving, or they own multiple homes, so they can leave here as tax-paying citizens anyway. This still isn't being addressed, and it's disturbing. And so rather than facing the truth, it's much easier to demonize. Let's pick wealthy people and blame them. If they only paid their fair share, the city would be great. Well, nobody seems to understand, using de Blasio as a paradigm. He took over a $67 billion yearly budget under Mike Bloomberg when the city was beautiful, raised it to $90 billion, and now we're in squalor. And that's not because of COVID. He's overspent, and people are leaving, and businesses were closing because he's taxing everybody to death and added 30,000 unneeded city jobs. So that's really what we're doing as a paradigm in terms of the Democratic Party. That's where I see us going. It's the squeaky wheel gets the most grease, and it's the squad.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, that's I'm glad you brought that up there, because I think it's really interesting is that you have the Democratic elites. They're blaming the squad right now, but that was so predictable. Okay,
Yeah.
so predictable. George, the one thing that, again, the lesson that I'm learning from this is that there is a growing, coalescing, pan-racial working class movement, and love him or hate him, Trump is very much at the center of that phenomenon right now. I'm still overwhelmed by it, and that's what the election results tell us. Go ahead, George.
Well, that may be the case. However, I think it's a little early to see that. I mean, I think he has increased his support among Hispanic voters and among African American voters, but it's still a very small increase. It's a problem for the Democrats, and the Democrats will attempt to address that. And the way they do it is, of course, by whipping up fear of racism, fear of the white man, fear of the uncouth neo-Nazis who apparently populate Middle America. So that may still prevail. But I agree that Trump has achieved quite a great deal, which no one had expected, because the guy who had been demonized as the worst racist fascist since Adolf Hitler turned out to actually increase his support among African Americans. But I don't think it's yet a significant amount. I don't think he's yet really
George,
into that black vote.
But I mean, traditionally, winning on the margins does make the difference, and I think that has statistically been proven. But I guess maybe we should take a wait and see here. You know, Rob, I mean, can they turn the clock back to 2012, 2016? I don't think it's possible. I think too much has changed. And I think that with the advent of this cancel culture, I mean, look what the Lincoln Project is doing. They should be so embarrassed by themselves. I mean, this is just tearing a page from Mao's Red Guard. I mean, we're going to intimidate you into silence, and they're proud of it. They're proud of it. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, in terms of turning back the clock, the one thing that surprised me, but it's done again with manipulative tactics, is Obamacare, which now Biden wants to call Bidencare. I tried to use it. I spoke about it on the air constantly. It never worked properly. And yet people are still grasping onto it again because very loud voices. I've proven this. The biggest defenders that I found of Obamacare were people that didn't use it. Blocked by Steve Ratner from Morning Joe because I said, I will stand by you and come on the air and defend Obamacare with you if you use it. Blocked. And I saw, what they did was they blamed Mitch McConnell. Well, it would have worked better if Mitch wasn't involved. So I think we're going to see another disaster and another failure there. And they are going to have problems implementing whatever policy they want.
Yeah,
right.
But
It's
like a 70%, 30. Hang on. It's like a 70% thing. People want to have single-payer healthcare. The majority of Republicans want it too. It's only when it gets up to the power brokers that it breaks down. Sorry, George, go ahead.
Right, but that's the point. That in fact, Trump was going about it very shrewdly, because once you take away the mandate, and once you say, hey, you've got to take care of pre-existing conditions, then of course all the insurance companies are going to depart. I mean, no, they'll be nuts to continue to insure people if there's no mandate and if they have to cover pre-existing conditions, because then no one's going to buy any insurance, because the moment you get sick, that's when you buy insurance, and the moment you recover, then you stop paying the premiums. So in fact, it was actually quite a shrewd move on Trump's part. That's the way you get rid of Obamacare. Now
well,
you go back to it.
Here's one of my favorite Obamacare stories, and I'm a healthy diabetic, so I know what I need and I know what needs to be treated. Yet when I attempted to sign up, and then I didn't go through with it because I signed up for the bronze, realizing then that I needed the silver, and I couldn't change it on the internet, and I had to call, and I'd be put on hold for an hour and a half, and then I'd be upset, and I would say, "Excuse me, but it's very frustrating. I've been on hold for an hour and a half, and I want to switch to the bronze," and then they'd hang up on me. So I actually called back, and I said, somebody hung up on me, and the person, the Obamacare person, was like, "Oh, you're probably rude to them." And anyway, I found out I couldn't switch from the bronze to the silver, and they were sending me these emails then going, "Great news, you're going to get prenatal care." And I used to write back, "But I'm a man, and even if I was a woman at 63, I don't want to get pregnant." Then this is 2 years ago. I'm going to be 65 soon and getting Medicare, but it's that absurdity. Then I signed up for private insurance in 15 minutes on the phone with a fabulous plan. But when Obama first took office, I paid $303 a month for private insurance that covered everything. And when he left office, that same insurance cost about $1,000 a month, and I could barely get anything. And even though he was going to give me the prenatal care, they used to, whenever I ordered a diabetes medication, I was told, "You have to prove you're a diabetic." Well, I don't know, how should I prove it? You want another blood test? And why would I take a diabetes medication if I'm not a diabetic? Am I going to hawk it on the street? But this is what happens when you deal with government and red tape, and why the government shouldn't be running anything, including the post office. That's why we have FedEx and UPS.
Okay, George, I'll give you the last word here. Go ahead.
Well, I think the Democratic Party is now a coalition of big tech, big banks, and Wall Street. And then they have their shock troops who try to impose order in the streets. They can keep doing this for a while, so long as they can practice the censorship, which this is obviously going to be a part and parcel of the new democratic dispensation. But sooner or later, the country will explode. The people aren't going to tolerate this indefinitely. So I think there are interesting times ahead.
Yeah, when Trump was elected, I remember, and then the ridiculous Russiagate hoax really picked up steam, particularly in December of that year, and then we had the intelligence consensus that came out in January. I remember saying on Crosstalk, the institutional damage this is going to do to the country, it will be difficult to comprehend. Well, here we are in 2020 in November after an election, and that institutional degradation is obvious for anyone that wants to see it. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, George here. If you like the Gaggle here, please like, share, and subscribe. And as George likes to say, we're going to be laser focused on events as they unfold here. Wait for more.